Thank you. And good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for the Leicestershire Safer Community Strategy Board. Still a few people joining us, but I'll start with some introductions first. So I'm Deborah Taylor, lead member for Children and Families and the chair for this board. I'll just go down my list as I see them. If you can just introduce yourself. So I've got Andrew Woodman.
Hi, I'm Andrew Woodman. I'm the CSP chair in North West Leicestershire.
Thank you. Anita
Chavda, Community Safety Team, County Hall.
Willie.
Willie Bark, Police and Crime Commissioner.
Bob.
Hello, Bob, being Head of National Probation Service for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland.
Chris Thomas.
Hi, I'm Chris Thomas, Head of the Community Safety Team in the County Council.
Thank you. Alan Pearson.
Hi, I'm Pearson, Chair of CSP Melton.
Gavin Drummond.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Gav Drummond from Leicestershire Police. I'm a DCI within the Violent and Complex Crime Unit, and I'm here representing Detective Chief Superintendent Shane O'Neill.
Thank you. Ewan.
Ewan Walters, Democratic Services, Leicestershire County Council.
Rachel.
Morning, Rachel Garton, Designated Nurse for Safeguarding with Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland CCGs.
Joshna.
Hi, I'm Joshna Maggi. I'm a consultant in public health at Leicestershire County Council.
Carl.
Good morning, Carl Bowden. I'm the lead for community risk and community safety from Leicestershire Fire and Rescue Service.
Thank you. Lucy.
Morning, I'm Lucy Booth. I'm one of the communications leads for Children and Family Services at Leicestershire County Council.
Mark Smith.
Good morning, Mark Smith, Community Safety and Youth Officer for Oadby and Wixton Borough Council.
Ted Parton.
Good morning. I'm representing the Leicestershire Fire Authority. I'm also the Vice Chair of this committee.
Rick.
Hello, everybody. It's Rick Basra, Leicestershire County Council Community Safety.
Julie.
Morning, everyone. Julie Robinson, Head of Neighbourhood Services, Charlton Borough Council.
Sarah.
Sarah Pickering, Community Safety Manager, Harbour District Council.
Sean.
Morning, everybody. Sean Arbuthnot. I'm the Prevent Coordinator for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland.
Sharon.
Morning, I'm Sharon Stacey, Director of Community Services at Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council.
And Simon.
Hi, everybody. Simon, Harbour CSP Chair.
I think someone else just joined us. Was that you, Stevie?
Yeah, morning. Sorry, I didn't have the invite to until a couple of minutes ago. I'm Steve Riley. I'm the Protect and Prepare Lead for Counter-Terrorism East Midlands.
Thank you. Is there anyone else I've missed that's joined since I started? Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Just before we start, I just want to propose that we just alter the agenda a bit. Bob has got to depart the meeting for a little bit, so I'm just proposing to bring item 9 up after item 6, if everyone's happy to do that. Have we got a seconder just to alter the agenda?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. We're all happy just to alter that around, so Bob can do his bit without us rushing at all. Okay, thank you. Okay, if we move on to item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. Pages 3 to 8. Is there anything on there? I didn't spot anything that we needed to raise from anyone. Are we happy that those minutes are the correct record of our last meeting? On to item 3, matters arising. Any matters arising from the previous minutes from everyone?
Chair, we were going to discuss about the communications and the use of the Leicestershire Matters to report issues such as car crime and break-ins.
Yeah, we've got Lucy on at item 6 to cover that.
Good.
And on to item 4, the LSC-SB action log. I think most of that's on the action log is either done or covered under today's meeting. I didn't pick up anything else that we need to address under that. Anything from anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to item 5, declarations of interest. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 6 now. So the community safety communications. So I've got Lucy Booth, the communications officer for Leicestershire County Council, to take us through this. Lucy.
Thank you. I'm just going to start kind of by giving a short update around kind of how Leicestershire Matters works, and then we can kind of go into any requests and kind of look at anything that we kind of want to plan in for 21-22, as we're kind of at that stage now. So Leicestershire Matters historically kind of went out more often. The format has now changed. We do a print version of Leicestershire Matters quarterly, and then we have our digital Leicestershire Matters that goes alongside this. You may have seen we've had 2 editions kind of in a short space of time. We had obviously a January and then a beginning of March. This was due to getting the latest edition out before the pre-election period started. So now for Leicestershire Matters, we have each edition carries a specific theme, and each page has a direction. So in the last 2 editions, obviously the January focus had the January edition had a focus around finance and financial pressures, and then the March edition had a focus around COVID. So some of the stories focus around priorities of the department. So the articles that we had in that featured for CFS included fostering adoption, the updates around free school meals, and one was around supporting young people during lockdown. Obviously, I understand from conversations with Kirsty, and apologies, I've kind of got a bit of patchy information, but obviously there is a desire for community safety to feature within Leicestershire Matters. So our usual process is there is usually a comms officer responsible for an area of work, and I think up until recently it was my colleague Stacey, who's now left the authority, and we're kind of recruiting for that post shortly. But what would usually happen is she would come with ideas of kind of articles that could feature in Leicestershire Matters, and then we'd see how they could fit in with the relevant themes. The best way to kind of do this is to provide, rather than having a solid idea of maybe what you want in the article, would be to provide themes of articles that would be relevant at the time, snippets of information, or kind of data that could be used as infographics, so that then we can try and fit them into the themes and kind of decide how to pitch the article within that particular theme. Obviously, it's a very complicated process, and I think some of the members of my team do age quite considerably while trying to go through this process. It is a tricky one. It is obviously politically influenced, and we do get very last minute changes to the article, so we do have to be quite fluid in the process. But obviously we are now coming up to 21-22 planning, and within the communications team we are currently meeting with directors and assistant directors to look at the priorities for the department and pick out the kind of the themes they want us to focus on for the next 12 months. So what I am suggesting to Kirsty, who kind of oversees this, and apologies she can't be here today, is that we build Leicestershire Matters into our kind of communications plan for 21-22 and look at the themes of the kind of themes for the community safety, where we could pitch it kind of every quarter for Leicestershire Matters, to build that into our plan, because that is something that hasn't kind of been picked up over the last 12 months, and we focus obviously heavily on social media, which it does work for us, but we need to start building in those other channels as well.
Okay, thanks, Lucy. So how can we sort of get that ball moving then, to get some ideas put together, and just really the best way forward for us to start to do that really as a group?
So we are currently, as I mentioned, we're meeting with, and we've just met with Jane and Sharon. So we'll be coming down to kind of heads of service and service manager level to look at exactly for the next couple of quarters what their priorities are and what work is coming up. So upon doing that, we'll start to build the plans.
Okay.
So I think if we can feed anything in kind of that way, we'll have it in the service plan for the next financial year, and we can then every quarter when we refresh the plans, we can really focus on what the specifics are for that, for the themes that are coming out.
Okay, so we best get members to feed in their thoughts and ideas to Ewan, and then get him to send them around. Yeah, is that the best way forward? Are members happy to do that? So if they've got anything particular that they think are themes that they want to sort of concentrate on for 21, 22, obviously it's like you say, it's quite fluid, isn't it, depending what we're dealing with and what's happening at that particular time. I mean, top of my list at the minute is the dog thefts that seem to be happening around the area, so it changes all the time, doesn't it? So if members are happy to do that, feed into you and any ideas that you've got that you'd like covered within the community safety, and we can put them forward then as a package and see what we can get in the magazine. Les.
Thanks, Deborah. Sorry, because I've only just dialed in. I had a load of IT problems yesterday. On the dog theft point, certainly locally, our police, there's a lot of social media noise out there at the moment about dog thefts and people leaving indicators and markers and all sorts of stuff. But certainly locally, there's only one reported actual dog theft. So I'm curious, can we get what I guess is, can we get hold of the stats for the whole of Leicestershire? And try and disseminate what's real and what's hype?
I think the chief did send something out to us.
I'm in IT meltdown at the minute, Deborah. I can't see if it came through my district email, which it would have done. I can't access anything.
I think a lot of it is like you say on social media. A lot of it is hype, but I know of 2 incidents where there's been attempted thefts of dogs in my area. So I think it is an issue. How big an issue it is, I don't know. It's just sort of what I mentioned, just to give members an idea of what we need to be quite fluid with, how we're dealing with issues that come forward, and we need to refresh that. We can't just set it now for 2021, 22. We need to be doing it at every meeting. We need to be discussing what our main priorities are and feeding that into the communications team.
Yeah, and just on that point, Deborah, there is increased social media noise, I would say, because of the way people are living their lives now, and this remote working and everything else. And actually, I think Leicestershire Matters is a really good tool to actually speak directly to our residents with fact and try and calm some of that noise down.
Yeah, definitely. Ted.
Well, I wanted to thank Lucy for coming here this morning. Mr. Phillimore and myself did obviously at the last meeting raise this issue, and today your proposal is has been carefully considered. So I wanted to place on record with thanks for coming and for agreeing to work with us to resolve this problem. It does seem like a very good solution, and for that I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Lucy, so at the moment our communication officer is Kirsty, but that will be someone new, you said, will be recruited. So it's just like, can we be clear who we're feeding into at a point in the future when we know for sure who's going to be with this committee?
There'll be an officer that does more of the day-to-day work, and it'll probably be Kirsty and myself that oversee she does some parts of children's and I do other parts. So we can have Kirsty and myself as kind of main contacts. So I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, okay. So for everyone happy to feed into you in what sort of things you think we should be focusing on, and then we'll put that together, put it to me communications scheme and see what we can come up with, getting something in the list. At least I think if we're mentioned, it just gets us on people's radar, doesn't it? And then they can also find out more information once we get on there, I think, really. So it's just a starting point for us, I think. All right, thanks so much for coming, Lucy, and explaining that.
Thank you.
Okay, so as I said, we'll swap the agenda around now. If we go on to item 9, the probation update, and over to you, Bob.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chair, and the meeting for allowing me to change the time in my slot to fit in with another commitment I've got this morning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. Always a nervy moment, just that it will happen. Can people see that? Is that come up, that screen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it there? Right. Thank you very much indeed. So what I intend to do is I'm conscious of the time that I've got, because it's a full agenda. So I shall go quite quickly through the slides and the opportunity for questions at the end. So strengthening probation, building confidence. That's the Ministry of Justice's headline, if you like, or title of the probation reforms that are happening over the next few months. Has the screen changed? It doesn't appear to. Have I got on?
No, still there.
I think there's a problem with my screen sharing. All right. How's that looking? Is that changed?
Yeah, that's showing. Yeah.
Righty-ho. So people will probably know on this board that since 2014 the probation service has been, largely speaking, in two halves, split between National Probation Service, which sat in the public sector, and then community rehabilitation companies, our local one being DLNR, Derbyshire, Leicestershire, Nottinghamshire and Rutland, sitting in the private and voluntary sector, delivering the management of medium and low risk cases plus unpaid work programmes and other interventions. So that has been going on since 2014. I think it's probably fair to say that has created a whole host of problems in terms of splitting the probation system in half, which I won't go into, but I think we were all pleased to see that the decision was made by government to reunify probation, to reconfigure it from a national point of view, as well as reunifying it. And I think the relevant bit in terms of the national reorganisation, in terms of regions, was that both the public and the private sector part of the probation service locally was part of a large Midlands division, which I think made it quite difficult to have a sort of more localised feel. Part of the new organisation puts Leicestershire probation as part of the combined Leicestershire probation as part of a smaller East Midlands region, which I think will make a difference in terms of how we can have a more local feel and be more engaged. So I think that's a really key part of the as well as the obviously one of unification. I think the fact that we're now a bit more local than we were, I think, will help as well. So the date for the unified model coming into place is the 26th of June of this year. It doesn't seem that long ago that seemed quite a distant date. It's now feeling very close, which brings mixed feelings. I can't wait for, and I think most people in probation can't wait for the unification to happen. So very much looking forward to that date. However, if dividing it in half was complicated, bringing it all back together again is proving very complicated indeed. So it's a bit scary that we're only 3 months away with quite a lot to do. One of the reasons, or one of the ways of dealing with that complexity, is that from the 26th of June, which is termed day one, actually, whilst everything comes under the probation service in the public sector, quite a lot of how we are currently structured won't change. The current team structures and caseloads, the way they're organised, will remain as is, and then it'll be over a few months post 26th of June that things will come together. However, We will be one organisation, so things like joint CRC and MPS representation at various partnership and joint agency meetings will cease. Will be one organisation. There'll be one head of probation for the Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, which will be myself, which will again offer some continuity there. So there will be changes from a partnership point of view, but there'll be some things that stay the same as well. I think the other key change that comes about as the probation changes is the introduction of something called the dynamic framework, and that's the way by which various services will be commissioned to enhance what probation do. So around about 10% of the probation budget nationally will actually be spent on the commissioning of services, and those services will either be commissioned nationally, regionally, or even locally. And that process has been going on for some months. So recently, the commissioning of services for employment, training, education, accommodation, and health and well-being have been awarded, and the accommodation one has been awarded for Dunacro, an organisation that we know well and we've worked with a lot. ETE and health and wellbeing has been given to Ingeus, and they are the current parent company for the local CRC. So again, there'll be some good continuity there. I won't go into too much detail here about how it will work. What I would say is that it does give opportunities for co-commissioning with other organisations, and in fact already that is happening. So the co-commissioning of substance misuse that's happening in the city and the counties for starting in April 2022, as a probation service, being able to join in with the local authority commissioners to enhance the criminal justice pathway, to put some of our dynamic framework money in on a local level, which, whilst proving a bit complicated and it's a bit trailblazing, I think that's the sort of the future in terms of opportunities that we'll have with this commissioning money that will come through the probation service. And those are the areas where we can commission services. And like I say, it will be a range of national, regional and local commissioning that happens. So like I say, what it means for you as partners, for us in the probation service, you'll only have one organisation to deal with from June the 26th. And there'll be some information sharing agreements that we have with yourselves and with cross-agency working that we do that will need some updating, but obviously we'll take the lead on that and identify anywhere it needs to be changed. The wording needs to be changed. There'll be some changes for those of you that work with staff who are currently in the CRC who will move to the probation service, public sector. There'll be changes to their contact email addresses and matters such as that. And there will be an office move, a couple of office moves in Leicestershire. Won't necessarily happen from June the 26th, but obviously we'll make sure that our partner organisations get full communications on that. So in terms of locally, some of the counties, the larger counties, are splitting into two what are called probation delivery units, and that's happening in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire. So there's a city and county ones. That's proving very complex. But in LLR, it will remain one probation delivery unit with one head, and like I said earlier, that will be myself. And our geographical footprint in terms of where we deliver services and what offices we deliver from will largely remain the same. Probably the main change will be that currently the CRC have a large office in the city centre in Friar Lane. That will eventually close, and all city-based probation services will run out of the Cobden Street office, which is the current National Probation Service office. But we'll continue to have a footprint in the main county towns as listed there. So that concludes what I wanted to talk about, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Bob. Just one from me. Just thinking about the CSPs, really, how that all going to fit in with working with the CSPs and sort of all the commissioning services and what they offer in their local areas. So do you see any changes with how probation sort of work with the CSPs?
I do. I think one of the significant, or one of the in my view, many disadvantages of splitting the service was that it made it more difficult for us to engage on that local district level, because we had our resilience halved. It was MPS and CRC that then had to sort of service. So I would envisage, and it's certainly it's certainly part of the target operating model. That's a very detailed document about how we'll be working in the future. That we will have a greater capacity to work at that local level and to engage with CSPs, perhaps in a way that probation used to, and we haven't been able to in recent years because of resources. I think it'll be interesting to see how it develops in terms of commissioning, how granular that level can go in terms of commissioning, but I don't see why not. We have to put forward quite robust and detailed business cases for any co-commissioning we do, but we've done that before, and you will be familiar with doing that sort of thing. So I think there's real opportunities there to take a more local approach to the use of that money. And I know that our regional director Martin Davis is very keen for us as local probation heads to pursue that and discuss that with localities in terms of how we can enter into that.
It might be a good idea at some point when you get to that point, is to meet with all the CSPs in one unit together and just have a virtual meeting, just to how, because obviously they're all different, but we all do the same thing in our district. So
we do attend the senior officers group, the CSP senior officers group, so we do have that link across the districts, but certainly we can bring that issue to the to those meetings, absolutely. And then obviously, but with the CSP chairs as well, absolutely. I think that would be a very useful thing to do.
And obviously come back again with an update as to whether you want to come back after June, or
I'm happy to do that. Yes, I'm happy to do updates as often as like I say, June will be pretty crucial, and it might be quite useful to do one in September when we're sort of 2 or 3 months into unification. Be more than happy to do that, Chair.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Bob. Is there anyone else got any questions for Bob? No one's got their hands up. Okay, thanks for that, Bob.
Thank you. Thanks again for changing the order of the agenda. I appreciate it.
Okay, if we go back to the agenda running order now, so we'll go back up to item 7, which is the Prevent update, and that's being presented by Sean.
Yeah, morning everybody, and thanks so much for inviting me this morning. I'll try and be fairly brief, but as always, the world of prevent and counter-terrorism is a fairly complex and constantly evolving landscape, as I'm sure you're all aware. But if I can just briefly sum up the recent challenges that we've seen. Certainly on a national level, despite the COVID pandemic, the risk of terrorism remains substantial nationally. And we've seen, obviously, recent attacks in places like Fishmongers Hall and Streatham, inside a prison establishment at HMP Whitemoor, and of course at Reading. But despite that, nationally, counter-terrorism police recently released figures detailing that they thwarted 3 terrorist plots over the course of the past 12 months. I've included in the briefing there the national prevent statistics, which were released in November of last year, and I'm not going to go into too much detail as far as they're concerned, because we could be here all day, but I do think it's probably worth reflecting on the recent trend that we're seeing in respect of mixed and unclear ideologies. So nationally, these would account for 51% of referrals, actually, when historically most of our workload has related to Islamist-inspired violence or the extreme right wing. So just for those who could perhaps do with a wee bit of background, I'll briefly explain what exactly we mean by mixed and unclear ideologies. And these relate specifically to those vulnerable individuals who don't necessarily support a specific group, a terrorist organisation, an extremist group, or even a specific political ideology, yet they may still wish to undertake some form of extreme violence or mass violence. The classic example of a case like this would be a young individual who aspires to some kind of school or college attack, very often inspired by US-style incidents like the Columbine massacre in 1999. In fact, a few months ago, we actually hosted Sue Klebold as a guest speaker for a webinar that attracted over 600 attendees. Sue is actually the mother of Dylan Klebold, who was one of the Columbine attackers, and she now does a lot of work in respect of researching mental ill health and murder-suicides and things like that. And it was fascinating to see the parallels between her experiences and some of the recent trends that we're seeing in Prevent. There are a number of other sort of mixed and unclear ideologies that may emerge as we go through into the future. The incel movement is something that's picking up a lot of steam across the pond in the USA and Canada. It's not something that we're seeing a lot of in the UK at the moment, but if we're doing any horizon scanning, we would anticipate that that may well feature a lot more going forward. And the incel movement basically relates to the online space and a community of mostly males who consider themselves to be involuntary celibates, i.e. they can't sustain or form romantic relationships with women, and then they come to resent that. And a very small minority of this community may well subscribe to violence as an outlet for that. So that's something that we're watching quite closely, and that explains the mixed and unclear trend that we're seeing. What we have seen during COVID is how a number of extremist groups have really tried to exploit the pandemic for their own ends. So if we think internationally, particularly from an Islamist violent point of view, a lot of international terrorist groups see the pandemic as an opportunity for them to kind of regroup and exploit the fact that Western governments are turning their attentions towards, dealing with the pandemic at a local level. What we're seeing, I guess, more locally is how right-wing groups in particular are trying to exploit the pandemic by pushing anti-COVID, anti-mask, anti-government, anti-vaccine narratives, which tap into the fears that a lot of people may well sometimes legitimately feel, and at the same time then promoting their own sort of white supremacist race theory type narratives around how, great replacement type theories about how white people are going to be a minority by 2060, for instance. And we've seen leaflets of this ilk, in some cases in LLR posted through people's letterboxes. On the one hand, they're getting an anti-COVID message from one group, and on the same day, they'll also receive this white supremacy narrative as well, which is something that I know that the police are aware of as well. And of course, as we all know, we're all living online more than ever now, and we've seen an acceleration in online radicalisation, as you would expect. And partly to counter that, local police held a brilliant event earlier on this week online in respect of online safety. It attracted over 400 participants. We had an input from Warning Zone, who are one of our local Prevent partners, and a recording of that should hopefully be made available in the coming days, and I think that'll be worthwhile sharing with the group as soon as I get it, because to be honest with you, I was furiously making notes. There were so many tips that I wasn't aware of that are just useful for day-to-day life. So those are the challenges, but locally we're adapting to meet them. One of the main ways in which we've done that is through our Prevent projects that are Home Office funded. Most of them historically would have relied on physical face-to-face delivery in schools, colleges, community centres, etc. But so many of them have now moved into the online space and come up with new and unique ways of working in order to reach young audiences and vulnerable people. And again, we could be here all day if I went into the weeds of how each and every one of them did that. But if you'll permit me, I just want to briefly tell you about one of them. So Street Vibe Young People's Service based in Braunston have for the last 2 or 3 years used augmented reality technology for a project called Real Talk, which raises awareness of extreme right terrorism and fake news and disinformation online, etc. But now that they're not able to actually physically go into places to deliver that, what they've done is they've developed, I don't know if you can see my screen, this small business card that can be sent out to people. And basically, if you download a particular app, you can hold your phone or your tablet up to the card and the workshop comes alive in front of you and you can click your phone and go through it. it's really difficult to explain how good it is via this medium, but it is really good. And we're getting these cards out. We've got 2,000 of them to disseminate in the first instance, but we'll have more from April onwards to spread throughout LLR. And people can do the workshop themselves, you know, from the comfort of their own home or in a classroom or wherever it may be. So COVID has actually pushed us into more kind of innovative ways of working, which I think are really beneficial, because that will reach far more people than the original workshop did. The other thing that we've done over the past 12 months is we've really strengthened our local governance, and our partnership engagement is as strong as it's ever been. And that's something I'm really pleased to report on. We now have a tiered oversight structure in Prevent. So whereas historically we would have relied on the Prevent Steering Group as the main multi-agency body that holds Prevent to account and has oversight of what we do, we now have a Prevent Executive Group as well, which provides the strategic oversight. And we also have a Prevent Operational Leads Group, where we get the key people from each sector who are able to drive their local Prevent action plans, discuss risks and challenges, share good practice, and really get into the fine-grained detail of what we need to do to promote Prevent delivery across LLR. And already it's proven to be a really good way of sharing information and good practice and supporting each other. So I have to say the partnership engagement at the moment is really, really strong. And then in terms of our channel panel, for those who aren't aware, channel is the main safeguarding process that supports Prevent referrals who are high risk that get referred to us. And our channel panel has been largely unaffected by COVID, thankfully. The support to vulnerable individuals has remained consistent. And we just this week undertook our annual channel self-assessment, actually. So we've got quite a mature and well-evolved channel panel, so that even though the Home Office produced updated channel duty guidance in the last few months, our own channel panel remains relatively unaffected by that, save to pick up maybe one or two little snippets of good practice that can enhance our offering at the moment. So channel remains largely unaffected by COVID, thankfully. So going forward, there's just three main issues that I'd like to highlight for you this morning, and they are the new projects that we're going to have for 2021-22, Home Office regionalisation, which may have an impact upon LLR, and the independent review of Prevent. So in respect of the new projects, you'll all have received a PowerPoint prior to this meeting outlining what our proposed new projects for the next year are going to be. Many of them are a continuation of our existing relationships with local organisations, and there's a few new ones thrown into the mix there as well. The reason we haven't shared them more widely yet is that we're just awaiting ministerial sign-off for those, but we're expecting to receive that in the next week or two. And basically, these projects have all been selected through our partnership structures, really. We had an open and transparent application process. The bids that we received were independently scored by partners and set against the counter-terrorism local profile, which means that the ones that we put forward to the Home Office are all aligned to specific local threats and risks. I'm pleased to say that out of the 13 projects that we bid for, we received all of them, and they're contained in your packs there. What I would say is that Leicester City is the priority area where the Home Office funding is received. That's where the most threat and risk is located. That's where over 60% of our local Prevent referrals come from. But despite that, if there are any emerging issues and risks across LLR, then we're very happy to be generous with those projects and send them out to districts to do various workshops and bits and pieces there. And I think because so much of the work that they do now is so accessible through the online space and through the Real Talk cards, for instance, that I talked about, that affords us the opportunity to be a good deal more generous than ever before and cast them out far and wide, because we're not limited in terms of actually having a physical presence in so many locations. So my plea to everybody would be that if you would like more information on the projects and would like to see them in your particular areas, then please get in touch with me over the course of the next few weeks. The second thing going forward that I was going to mention was regionalisation. And this is a new initiative that the Home Office are putting in place, basically to try and address the balance between priority areas nationally receiving all of the Home Office funding for Prevent projects and for Prevent posts like mine and the Prevent Education Officer at the City Council, for instance. And it's basically a way of trying to do more with the same amount of funding. And they're putting in place regional support officers, essentially regional coordinators, whose responsibility will be to attend local partnership boards and share good practice and act as a conduit between the Home Office and local authorities in those non-funded areas that perhaps could do with a little bit of assistance in terms of their prevent duty and meeting their legal responsibilities. They won't have a specific role in terms of actively rolling up their sleeves and getting involved in delivery, nor will they have any additional funding for the likes of projects, for instance. But the adverts for those jobs will be going live on Monday, I'm led to believe. We will have one regional coordinator who will cover the East Midlands. And I would imagine in the short term, their initial focus will be on places like Northamptonshire, especially as they move into their new structure of a two-tier authority. In LLR, historically, we've had a model whereby myself as the Prevent coordinator has supported colleagues across Leicestershire and Rutland. And to be honest with you, I don't anticipate that's going to change greatly. My hope is that the role of the regional coordinator will enhance the offering that we can give to LLR and that we'll very much work together. So we'll see how that develops moving forward. And then the last thing I was going to mention is the independent review of Prevent, which I don't want to dwell too much on, to be honest, because at the end of the day, it's not really my place to publicly comment on the rights and wrongs of the independent review. After all, it's my homework that's being marked. But there understandably and rather predictably has been a fairly mixed reaction to the recent appointment of William Shawcross as the independent reviewer of Prevent. That was there was an open, lengthy selection process, but ultimately the decision came down to the government as to who they wanted to pick as the independent reviewer. And you may have seen recent press around a boycott of the review, spearheaded by a number of different, predominantly Muslim organisations. But from my point of view, I think that anybody who has sort of criticisms of the government appointment, and some of the criticisms I think levied at Mr. Shawcross have been, in my view, a wee bit unfair and lacking in context, given the fact that since the appointment's been made, I've done a bit of a deep dive myself into the man himself and his background, and I've read his books and examined his time at the Charity Commission. And I think that the debates being played out in the public arena are a little more simplistic than they perhaps should be. So from my point of view, if the review team seeks to visit Leicester, then I will certainly engage with them and highlight the good practice that we have in place locally, and make my own suggestions for ways in which we could develop Prevent further. And although it may be difficult, I will try and encourage as many of our local communities to get involved in that as I can. And I've been reassured somewhat, actually. I've held a series of focus groups, actually, with different community groups over the last 3 or 4 weeks. And when you get away from the background noise, so to speak, actually the views of our local representatives are a lot more nuanced, and I don't anticipate that there'll be any issues with engagement with the review where that required of us. So that's where we are as far as Prevent's concerned in a nutshell. But of course, I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Sean. Just a couple for me. You've answered some of my questions for me, but I've said this to you before and I'll say it again to you just to make sure that the county have the benefit of some of those projects, because there are excellent projects and we need to get those out into the county as well, not just focus just on the city. Just about those cards that you were talking about, the Real Talk cards. I'm sure you're aware we've got elections coming up soon, and I'm sure many members would be very happy to put those cards through letterboxes for you. If you can get them out, I'm very happy to put them through letterboxes with my election leaflet. So if you want to get some printed and find a way of getting them out to us or collecting us, I'm really happy to do that for you.
That is a stunning idea, because one of the things that we always seek to do is try to reach beyond the normal cohorts that our projects engage with, and Real Talk historically would go into schools and colleges, but this year our challenge is to find ways to reach out to parents and carers and wider communities, and so that sounds absolutely ideal. So what I'll do is I'll put you in touch with James Clacy, who runs the project, and he'll be able to get the cards sent out wherever they need to go. That's brilliant.
Yeah,
thank you.
I'm sure other members will. I'll put it out to other members as well, that, you know, we might as well, while we're walking the streets, we might as well put them through letterboxes. But thanks. I'll take some questions for you. Ted, I think you were first.
Sean, I appreciate your real candour in what you've said and how you've really given a comprehensive briefing. But could I drill down on some detail? The notable developments and challenges, it does obviously say nationally. Now, do we have figures certainly for local, for Leicester? And the next point is that you've said that most of the work is being focused in the city. So can you expand on what that work is? Are we talking anti-Islamic extremism, or is this right wing as well? And also, when we're talking about to what extent are we talking about individuals versus groups? Because of course, when we look at right-wing organisations, the number of people that they've killed in terrorist attacks is virtually nil. Individuals have. So where do those two sit? And then my final question is how worried are you that books such as the Anarchist Cookbook can be even ordered from Waterstones or Amazon?
Yeah, those are great questions, and I certainly anticipated the first one about the local figures. I was loath to give them, to be perfectly honest, because they're not in the public domain per se, but they are available in the counter-terrorism local profile. And because they're owned by police, I'd sooner have permission before giving them out. But I think I can quite comfortably say in broad terms that the figures that we've got locally for the past year go up to about November 2020. And in that time, we had 179 prevent referrals across LLR, the majority from the city. 88% of those referrals have been male. The majority have probably come from counter-terrorism policing, and that's because due to the pandemic, with so many students not attending schools, historically we would have received a lot of referrals from education, so that figure will obviously have gone down over the summer months and the start of the last academic term. It's a real mixed bag in terms of the types of referrals that we get in LLR, and this is a very anecdotal, broad way of describing it, but it's fair to say that the majority of city-based referrals tend to subscribe to an Islamist-inspired violent mindset, and the majority of county-based referrals tend to be more right-wing. But in terms of where the county and Rutland sit, there's no real discernible pattern. As you suggest, it's mostly individuals that we're seeing as opposed to group activity, and those individuals in the main are vulnerable through their online behaviour. I'd say about 50% of prevent referrals have a very strong online footprint, and the worry is that people can then have an almost pick and mix approach and adopt a very personalised sort of journey of radicalization, so to speak, by taking something from a forum here and a chat room there and a WhatsApp chat here and coming up with something that sort of fits their specific needs and grievances and vulnerabilities. So it's a complex picture. But as far as the city is concerned, that's kind of where we're at. And then in terms of the publicly available material, I mean, that is a huge concern. It wasn't that long ago that you would be able to freely download the Al-Qaeda magazine Spire and receive bomb-making instructions through that. There's a lot of extreme right-wing material that hasn't been banned but is freely available through Amazon and Waterstones and the like. Historically, it will be on a more obscure platform, etc. Interestingly, there's just recently been a national launch of a new app. It's called, what is it called? I Report It, I believe it's called. It was launched by the Mayor's Office in London, but it's been taken on nationally. And that's basically a way in which people can easily report extremist content online and help it to be removed. And that's one of the things that the police are keen on is disseminating that app far and wide. But another option is just to Google report extremist content, and that takes you straight through to the government's website where you can report extremist content online. I think where we're going to get into really problematic and challenging territory is, as you suggest, when it comes to those companies and organizations in the private sector, trying to influence them as best we can to be a little bit more responsible in terms of the things that they're making available. And that's a constant battle that the government are having, and something that might come to fruition more through the protect duty, which is undergoing consultation at the moment. So obviously we've got a prevent duty. One of the other P's of counter-terrorism is protect, which is about industry and the private sector and infrastructure and things like that. And that might be something that the protect duty may wish to consider, is encouraging people in the private sector, for instance, to take more responsibility for stopping this content from being available. I'm afraid that's a very long-winded answer, but it was such a good question that merited it.
Okay, if members don't mind, that got their hands up. Steve just wants to come in because he's got another meeting to go to at 11, so I'll take Steve next if that's okay.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, first meeting, I'm hijacking it. But yes, so my name's Steve Riley, and this is a bit of a seamless link to Sean there because he talked about the protect duty. I am the counter-terrorism lead for Protect and Prepare East Midlands. So it's clear you've got quite a good overview and understanding of prevent. The other area obviously is pursue, which is the traditional intelligence investigation side, and my side deals with the twin pillars under contest of protect, which, as Sean said, is around sites, infrastructure and individuals actually, and also prepare, which is really around resilience, CT preparedness, exercising and training. Really happy to take questions at the end. Sorry, this might be a little bit quicker than I anticipated, just because I need to get away for 11ish. So the protect duty, the background to this has come from Martin's Law, which was one of the bereaved family members from the Manchester Arena inquiry. The protect duty itself was launched on the 26th of February, and to be fair, it's been a couple of years in the making. It's a Home Office consultation, so this is not a counter-terrorism consultation. In actual fact, counter-terrorism are also being consulted by the Home Office. We are one of the key stakeholders, so whilst we support the protect duty, we also have to feedback to the government as well and the Home Office. The consultation for counter-terrorism comes back to the Home Office in April, but for the wider consultation document, that goes back in July, the 2nd of July, I believe it is. It's a very, very broad, wide-ranging concept, really, and it applies to local authorities, business, mainstream policing, counter-terrorism policing, and it refers to almost an element of putting risk assessments around public spaces and places. The traditional model in the UK around counter-terrorism and protect has been one that's been based really around sites. So if we think around the traditional days of the IRA, where they would use sort of improvised explosive devices, maximum impact, potentially maximum casualties, you will have seen, and Sean alluded to it in a piece he gave, that some of the attack methodology now has changed over the years, and it's moved into public spaces and places. So those places such as Reading was in a park. The couple of attacks in London have been in crowded public spaces to do with nighttime economy. So it's how we change our protective security stance to encompass that and encompass some of the lessons that are coming out of the Manchester Arena inquiry. As such, the protect duty, as I said, is very wide ranging. The kind of benchmarking that's done at the minute in terms of who it will apply to any large organisation employing 250 staff that operate in publicly accessible locations. It'll also apply to owners or operators of public accessible venues who've got a capacity of 100 more people. So that is your pubs, your clubs, your temporary events, your sporting events. And then the greyer area, if you like, will be the public spaces. So places such as parks and beaches, which on one day can be completely empty, on another day, on a hot summer's day, can be full of people. So that's the wide application of it. It would place a duty on owners and operators of those places to have a framework in place, almost like a health and safety type framework. And what they would have to have in place are responses to any type of attack, assess the impact of any attack on the staff and the public, and put in place, and the wording is reasonable, practical and appropriate protective security measures to bolster their organisational preparedness. So in the same ways they might have a fire safety plan, or they might have health and safety around reasonably foreseeable risks, the idea is to lift that and put that into the counter-terrorism space around likely attack methodologies, such as low sophisticated attacks, such as bladed weapons, this kind of thing. In terms of support for businesses, local authorities, there are products already available, such as ACT e-learning and the ACT app. There's something called the Information Sharing Platform, which has been developed by the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office, which will talk around mitigation, attack methodology and threat responses. That will go online later this year. In terms of enforcement, it's very, very unclear. It doesn't really say that in the Protect Duty consultation. It actually talks about that there'll be legislation and there may be fines as a result of non-compliance, but it doesn't say, crucially, who is going to be the enforcement body. I think from a policing perspective, we would probably be reluctant to do that. I don't know to we've got the capacity to do that. Would it be farmed out to a private body, a government body? It's unclear at the minute. So the more responses we can get, and coordinated responses back to the Home Office by 2nd of July, I believe it is the better. And I'm really happy in the next couple of minutes to take any questions. I'm sorry that's a very quick whistle-top tour. There is a lot to this, but anybody's got any questions for me, then please shout.
Steve, it'd be handy to send that link round for that to Ewan, and then he can send out to all members of the group so we can have a look at that consultation.
Yep, sure, I can do that. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
I've got two hands up, Les and Rachel. Are those specific questions for Steve, or are they just general questions?
No, mine's for Sean. Thank you, Deborah, but it probably straddles into Steve's, but let's just give it to Sean and deal with it.
Okay, is there anyone else that's got specific questions for Steve before he has to go? Okay. All right, thanks for that, Steve.
Got off lightly. Okay. Thank you very much.
Send that link out. All right. Thank you. Les, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. Sean, unless I missed it, can you just put that little card up in front of the camera again, please?
Yeah, of course. So.
And on the other side? What I'm looking for was a QR code.
Well, we do have some with the QR code, believe it or not.
Now, I think, Sean, following on from Deborah's comment, I'm equally happy to drop, as we are all going to be out Camp Leaflet King anyway. Two other points though. So number one, you won't be aware, but I'm the regional chairman for the Federation of Small Businesses. And we nationally, we generally support social responsibility campaigns or socially responsible campaigns. So if you, Ewan can give you my contact details. If you want me to explore with our comms team and the board, if it's something they're prepared to promote, then of course, we're representing 5.5 million SME businesses, so the private sector side that you mentioned. And then the third point is, as the county, we have COVID champions, of which I am one of the signed up supporters. And once a week, we put a very short social media post out, and it's usually just an image with a particular message. Is that something that you could do with us as well? Is there an opportunity to just that once a week, send us that sort of key theme, and then we can post it out across our social media networks?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'd be delighted to be involved, because one of our biggest challenges in recent months has been engaging with the private sector in particular. In actual fact, we received some Home Office funding for free places on we call it a care course, confidently addressing radicalisation and extremism. It's a course that would normally cost £100, £150, something like that. I don't know for sure, but we've got free places available for people representing the private sector. So I'd be very grateful if you could disseminate details of that far and wide. But likewise, I'd be more than happy to provide you with, regular messaging to be promoted. And again, yeah, the Real Talk cards. The thing about using the QR code is it does work, but if you download the particular app that uses this sort of thing, it's really slick. So it just works better with this, but it doesn't deter people from using the QR code as well, which may be more familiar with people. So it can send both for sure.
I don't mind. I was just curious. Had you got the QR code on it? So I'd say Ewan, if you want to share my contact details with Sean, and then we can hook up directly, Sean, and have a chat and see what we can do to help. But absolutely, if you want to order 5,500 cards, I will join Deborah in ensuring they get through people's front doors. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. I've got 3 more speakers and I'm going to draw this to a close. Rachel.
Yeah, just a quick question in relation to source of referrals. I noted in your update that you said that nationally the majority of referrals come from police and education. I just wondered, is locally, is that the same picture? And then the other part of the question is,
we have really good engagement from LPT, CCG and UHL, but we're seeing more referrals probably from LPT and CCG, if I'm honest, and that's something that we're diving into. It's not a fault per se or a failing. We just want to understand the rationale behind it. And then on a personal note, I'm sometimes a little bit not skeptical, but the figures only tell us so much. To take a very brief example, I received a referral recently from social services, and I put them in touch with the police prevent team. So they made the referral then to the police. Now, I don't know what is classed as the referral source for that one. Is it the police? Is it social services? Or is it the brother of the family member that reported it to social services in the first place? So the figures only tell us so much, but yeah, certainly locally from a partnership point of view, good engagement. Our biggest red flag locally is the relatively low number of figures that we get from communities and families and friends. You're talking single digits for the year. And when we do get those referrals, they tend to be very significant and they would be high risk. So there's a lot of work to do to, I think, increase our reach and trust and visibility with local communities in that regard. I wouldn't say it's a huge feeling. It's still a reasonably high figure compared to other parts of the country, but we certainly don't want to rest on our laurels, and that's one of the reasons the police have recently launched the actearly.co.uk website to raise awareness of that and encourage referrals from communities in particular.
Okay, thanks. Chris?
Yeah, I'll make my point really quickly. It's just a bit of information, really, just around the new coordinator that's maybe coming and can assist across the county. I think it's a really important point. We've got a really strong LLR strategy group around Prevent, as Sean is already highlighted, and Sean gives excellent service, therefore, not just to the city, but to the LLR. But I think that when we get the new coordinators, but the Home Office funding has been very much focused on the city. The new posts that we're going to get will help us coordinate things. It will be, available as well across the East Midlands. But I think when drawing the link with Steve Riley, when the new Protect duty comes out, and there's going to be lots of questions from local businesses and all of that. And I think that the coordinator focused on more county issues we can able to coordinate things through that post. And I know that just to help us in the county, Edwina Grant from Hinckley is really, really active in terms of coordinating things as well with districts. So you know, it's just really giving you a heads up that we very much think that we will want to link into that post, notwithstanding that Sean does a great job on all the LLR stuff, but we'll get some focus on district. I just wanted to make that point post the summer, I think.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, last speaker, Alan, if you can all take your hands down, then we'll move on. Alan.
Thanks, Deborah. Sean, just you started off with some figures. The 51%, then another 40%, whatever terminology you used. I'm a bit confused because that's obviously general, or is it United Kingdom? That's not Leicestershire wide, because if we're talking about the figures, Leicester's got 300,000, we've got 780 or whatever. So it doesn't sort of resonate with me that I'd rather have local figures in comparison to what's going on in the city, what's going on in the county, and you know, pro rata. In reality, what is the weight of what's going on in one area may be totally disfigured by what's going on in another. So have you got figures such as that?
Yeah, it is a really difficult one. The police give really detailed breakdowns of those figures to our Prevent steering group on a quarterly basis. The ones that I gave at the outset are the Home Office national statistics, which are publicly available, and they refer to England and Wales. So they are more general, it has to be said. From an LLR perspective, it's very difficult to give really detailed figures without police permission, but to be I suppose fairly broad about it, 180 referrals in the past year is what we've had, with 60% of those in the city, and a real mix of ideologies. Islamist inspired and extreme right wing have made up the bulk of the channel cases that we've had locally over the past year. And very broadly speaking, again, the majority of right wing referrals that we get tend to be from the county and districts, but there wouldn't be one particular district, I would say, that is a hotspot, if you like. They're fairly evenly spread, individuals dotted around here and there, as opposed to being centred on one geographical location, for instance. But it would probably be helpful at a future meeting to hear from the police Prevent team who'd have the luxury of going into more details than I'm able to, I'm afraid.
Okay. I guess what I'm talking about weighted, because sorry, can I just a provisional there, Deborah? Sorry, because 60% if it's mainly from the city, which is 370, versus 40 from nearly 800, that totally changes the weight. And this is what I've always complained about. We don't really get a real clear figure of the balance between the two, and that doesn't help us as being a Leicestershire and being a district councillor. So I just felt I wish we could get more detailed figures, so then we could pinpoint a lot more successfully. So that's just my comment. Thank you.
Yeah, but it is a really good point, and it's something that we've been at pains to address over the last few months. We're now having more consistent meetings, for instance, with the district leads from the community safety teams, so we can go into more detail with them at the Prevent Operational Leads Group, for instance, about specific areas. So we're more responsive to that, and they're more aware of what the risks are if they don't necessarily attend the other partnership boards, if that makes sense. Okay. So it's a really good point. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can we invite the Police Prevent team in then? Is that something that members would appreciate get a report in and just take us a bit further for our next meeting? Okay. I'll leave that
Deborah,
to you. I'll leave that to you and to sort out for us. Okay, I'm going to move us on a bit because we're a bit behind time. So we're on to item 8 now, county lines, and I think Gavin, you're taking us through this report on behalf of Shona.
I am, yes. So thanks, Chair, and good morning again to everybody. I'm very conscious of what's left on the agenda, so I'll try and whip through this as quick as I can, and I hope everyone's had sight of the paper. It's quite detailed in there, so I'll whip through this, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those. So the purpose of the paper to the board really is just to provide the board with a bit of an update as to what the policing and partnership response is to county lines, and the fact that it's so intertwined within serious violence, and how might that impact upon CSPs, especially with a serious violence duty that's coming down the line at some point. And then just to give a bit of an update regarding specific sort of operational responses within some of the locality areas, and then to provide some recommendations as to how we feel that we could develop this further and to make improvements across the partnership and within the police. So just in summary, just for those that aren't really clear about what County Lines is, County Lines is effectively a business model for the transportation of drugs from one area to another, often including the transportation of drugs from large metropolitan cities into small rural market towns. There's a bit of a gap in the market, for want of a better word. And it often focuses on two things in terms of vulnerabilities, as it targets young people in terms of trafficking them from one area to another. And also they will look to target vulnerable adults through a cuckooing method, where they will effectively move in, take over their place of residence, and use that as a base to deal drugs from. It's a particularly successful business model, if that's the right phrase, and it generates significant amounts of money, and that's contained within the updates to the board. But as you can imagine, when we're talking about millions of pounds in a business model, there's things that come onto the back of that, and the fallout is largely serious violence that's impacting all our communities. So just to reassure those that it remains a strategic priority within our serious violence and our serious organised crime for the police, and I know that it sits within a number of the priorities for the CSPs. In terms of numbers, and I know that we've spoken about numbers across the other presentations, but we currently have 18 active County Lines operations identified across LLR, with 12 of those featuring within the county. And when we look at specific areas, they're predominantly within sort of the Harbour area, Northwest, Charnwood, specifically. But so effectively what we require is, in terms of identifying the county lines, it's very much a view that there's pursue element to it is where only one aspect, and we often use the line is we're not going to arrest our way out of the issue, and so the requirement for information intelligence couldn't be more critical, and the police only play a small part in that. And so in terms of generating that information intelligence, it's vital that comes from all agencies and including our communities. The business model within Leicestershire is because of our sort of geographical position and the transportation links in and out of the county, we are often one of those areas that our drugs are exported into. We're not predominantly an exporting force, so we do get other metropolitan areas that are supplying drugs into our areas. Within the paper, it does go through a number of different sort of recent disruptions across Leicestershire. I don't propose to go into those individually, but it does highlight some of the excellent work that's already ongoing, particularly at Northwest, Harbour and Charnwood, and some particularly good work. And again, as we move through the paper, that it will be how we as a collective use that good work to share best practice and to take some learning and to drive a more consistent approach to how we tackle county lines across not only Leicestershire but LLR. And again, I believe there's some work that's going on in the background regarding some case studies that's been brought together just to provide those real life examples. So just in terms of the current priorities again, so there's a variety of different tactical options that we're prioritising to tackle county lines. The difficulty with county lines is, and I think often that our communities want to see enforcement. It's not the only tactic that should be used. As soon as you enforce, if it's a particular location, if we don't have that appropriate wraparound service and that appropriate partnership response, all that happens is that gap in the market gets filled really swiftly and we're back to square one. So it needs to be the other elements of the sort of 4P approach that protect, prepare, rather than just the pursue element. So what we do in terms of our communities and making sure that our neighbourhood policing commanders across the different areas are supplied with sufficient information and intelligence. We centrally coordinate that through our Force Intelligence Bureau. So we do provide them with regular updates regarding what the county lines are in their area, who the sort of hotspot individuals are that are causing the most pain, and who the most vulnerable are, including both children and adults. And that information is going out regularly to the NPA commanders, who will be able to share a sort of a formatted version with the CSPs to make sure that they're targeting appropriately. As I've already alluded to, there's a number of different vulnerabilities associated to county lines. What we have identified, particularly recently, is missing persons, particularly missing children, and a number of locations that we've gone into and enforced. Specifically, recently, we have encountered missing children from other areas, London, West Midlands. So again, is that trafficking aspect and obviously the vulnerability to the children and what position they're being placed in. Just in terms of the partnership wraparound around sort of children and child exploitation, for those that aren't aware, we do have a safeguarding hub based at Wigston, which is populated from partners from both local authorities, the police and health, and we use that as an ability to sort of identify, assess and manage those vulnerable children, and then we sort of correspond with other adjoining forces to make sure that where we do have children that have been trafficked into our area, that there's appropriate support within their sort of host of data that will support how we identify hotspot locations for county lines. And within the report, it does talk about community reporting, how we generate that, things like needle finds and treatment services. So again, there's a number of different data sets there will support how we focus and prioritise our response to managing county lines. So what are the key issues for partnership working? Well, nationally, this is very much on the radar. Recent report by Dame Black regarding substance misuse again identifies the need to do more to protect children and to tackle substance misuse within our community. So again, there's a real push nationally, regionally and locally. Again, it talks there about potential, the profitability from county lines have been around £800,000 per county line. So you can imagine if you were the male or female running that county line, you would want to protect it with all your life. You wouldn't want to give up that business model, which again makes tackling this really tricky. And it's around, again, we've spoken a lot around developing information and intelligence. What is being done nationally is that the government have recently announced different funding pots, one of those being an £80 million funding for drug and substance misuse treatment that has been delivered locally by Turning Point. I met with them yesterday and sort of outlined some of the different funding streams that we might be able to tap into, but there's a real drive there to focus around criminal justice system to try and prevent substance misusers either entering the system or becoming repeatedly entering into it, to prevent drugs-related deaths and to extend those provisions and those service offerings to try and prevent people from engaging in substance misuse behaviour. So I'll move swiftly on to recommendations there, and then I'll call it a thing. But the recommendations is to note the continued partnership activity and development in relation to tackling county lines. Again, there is so much good work going on out there, but it's again how we sort of develop that and take that forward. To consider commissioning a review of the Leicestershire Community Safety Partnership activity to share learning and develop a best practice guide to disrupting county lines based on the disruptions outlined, accessible across partnerships involved. I think Mr. O'Neill's view around that was whether some of those CSPs that have already been leading on county lines and have some quite detailed experience of it, whether they will be able to sort of look to how that might be shared across the other CSPs which might not have had that exposure. To continue to ratify support from the Community Safety Partnership to utilise the existing awareness campaigns for county lines and to encourage continued reporting of concerns from communities and partners. And then there's a possibility of providing a more detailed oversight of the Dame Black report to the Community Safety Partnerships just for their consideration as to how they might prioritise some of those recommendations and to take it forward within their localities. And I've said that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but obviously there's quite a bit of detail in the paper, and I'm happy to answer any questions people might have.
Thanks, Gavin. I think for me, the increase in the missing children and finding them in these engaged within these county lines is really concerning. Are they, once the children are found and took away from this, are we keeping them away from it? They're not going back in for it? Is that wrap around there? Is it new children that are going in, or are we finding children are going back to that even once we've found them?
No. So the first question is, what we're trying to do is try not to criminalise children that we're finding in these locations. And so whilst there might have been an initial arrest made, what we do is offer that safeguarding wraparound within our custody suite, and we make sure that there's opportunities there to prevent further offending and to make sure that they are safeguarding. So when I spoke about the safeguarding hub model within Leicestershire, that's very much what they are designed to do, is to make sure that that safety planning around that child is there to prevent them from re-engaging and going back to the location. So yeah, absolutely, that's what we work towards.
Okay, and just for your recommendations there, I mean, I think it would be good to share best practice. You know, there's no point inventing the wheel if we've already done it and got some good work. So it's just how we go around with the community safety partnership, sort of doing a review and sharing best practice. I mean, just what's the best way to take that forward rather than just agreeing a recommendation. It'd be good to have some meat on the bones about how we're going to do that.
Yeah, I don't know whether that would look like a focus group just to begin with, or a bit of a task and finish group, and whether one of, you know, I know Charnwood have had significant experience, as has Harbour, whether one of the CSPs just wish to lead on that and just pull it together. I think once the case studies have been pulled together, they are really helpful to run through, because there's lots of tactical options that are available to CSPs that will help prevent reoffending within their locality. But it's just, as I say, the police can keep kicking down doors, but it doesn't resolve the issue.
Yeah, I'm going to pick on Julie now. Is that something you're happy to lead on, Julie, for Charnwood?
I'm happy to be involved. Obviously just a bit busy with COVID at the moment, but we can always get involved. I think the other thing just to point out is that obviously from a Charnwood perspective, we have presented to this board previously with Shane O'Neill in terms of from a district perspective and our involvement in Op Lionheart. And North West have had an input as well. So there has been some of that sharing and learning. I'm happy to have a conversation with Gavin if he wants in terms of how we might coordinate that or how we might do that.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Julie. I know you're very busy. And just to say, Gavin, there's some great work going on. You know, obviously I was involved with Operation Lionheart and stuff, and I know there's been some great arrests in North West and stuff to deal with this, but it's an ongoing issue that we're fighting all the time, isn't it? And it's just trying to find how to end it. The mobile phone being registered would be great, wouldn't it, rather than these burner phones that they can get their hands on, and within 5 minutes to set the line back up again would be good. So
yeah, absolutely. Just on the mobile phone, the sort of tactics that we've been and again, I don't know whether people think this is ethical, but I'll explain why we do it. Is often once we've downloaded the contact numbers within those phones, is that we've now taken to texting all those numbers associated to that county line to offer drug treatment services and to offer because ultimately, as soon as we enforce and remove that line, you'll have hundreds of people that haven't got access to drugs. What does that then create? That creates offending, that creates serious violence because people are moving into different markets. So it's just having a broader perspective on how we manage when we do enforce. What's the safeguard and wrap-around for those people that are accessing?
I was just going to go back to it if there's no support there. Yeah, no, great. Okay, thanks. Couple of questions for you, Ted.
Thank you, Gavin, for this. I noticed when Operation Lionheart took place that there was quite clear publicity of the number of arrests. And I know it's understood that you have spoken about the fact that, you know, whilst it's great for the social media aspect of showing a video of the police breaking the door down, certainly it enthuses the local community. But and I know, obviously, I'm another Charnwood resident, so I'm lucky enough to have an absolutely superb police team in Charnwood. Quite brilliant they are. But what's the reason we don't publish figures anymore? I haven't seen any sort of figures recently for arrests. And also that leads to the next question. It's almost a little bit like the terrorist threat. Have the government or police forces ever considered, you know, publicising some sort of level of threat of the amount of lines there are? I mean, you have given a number of lines in Leicestershire and Rutland, because on point 28, there's a line that says potential future saturation of county lines markets raises the threat of violence still further. So from that, we would deduce that it seems like it's actually increasing. Is that the case, that no matter what we've done so far, the market is actually increasing, or we're holding the level at the same, or is it decreasing? And then just one final point, Gavin. This could be a typo, but point 6, I didn't quite understand the line, the paragraph where it says, with 12 affecting the Leicestershire area, due which matches the preference for targeting market towns where existing drug supply networks may not be as established.
Okay, yeah, I'll try and pick through some of those. I'll just start with that one. So yeah, I think there's just a slight typo in there. Effectively, there's what Mr. O'Neill's was saying. There's 12 affecting the Leicestershire county areas, which is seen, which is sort of commonality around sort of the national picture regarding market towns, and I think that's what he was trying to address there. In terms of data, we collate data, and through your CSPs, that shouldn't be an issue in terms of if you're looking for something very specific to a locality around drug offences, then we would have access to that data. Just in terms of threat assessment, and again, it's just to reassure you, so we have an internal threat assessment which we do across all our county lines operations. So we are forever, we call it a RAG assessment, to make sure that we're prioritising and deeming where we need to take forward, and then that links into our organised crime assessments as well. Again, we use something called a morale scoring, which will assess a number of different areas, sort of, you know, economically, geographically, sort of the danger to public. So we conduct that sort of morale scoring assessment, and that allows us to prioritise which county lines we need to address over other areas, if that makes sense. But that's very much an internal focus. But what we would do is, if we identified a county lines that we've RAG assessed as red and had come up significantly higher than morale, we would then look beyond, you know, as we would do anyway, but more significantly beyond those pursue elements. And that's when I would be expecting the neighbourhood commanders to be coming to the CSPs and the JAGs to look at that partnership response. So to answer your question, Ted, yes, we do that assessment, and then there is an outward facing process to that, but it might not just be that you'll see the intricacy of the assessment because of the sensitive nature of what we're discussing. Does that make sense?
Okay, thanks, Ted. Alan?
Thank you, Gavin. Just quickly, I've just made some notes here. Part of my portfolio in Melton is housing, and we're increasing housing stock. I think recently we had a house that we closed because there was drug dealing, and it was in the newspapers. I'm not, and please everybody here, I'm not sort of targeting or profiling, but we have a lot of issues in some of our social housing and also housing association. Now, we've just gone through a massive process of a new green paper, responsibilities of landlords. We're a landlord. Not all councils are, but we're a landlord. We've got over 2,000 other houses, and some others have more. I think Charlwood's got the housing back. I think he had some group used to run it. The issue is, part of that process, we're landlords, and we've got the new green paper. We have something called TFAP. We have residence groups or tenants groups, not residents as such. And what I don't see is a strong enough link with visits, with visiting voids and reporting, obviously, drug abuse, or when we do visit to see the quality there. Because some of those housings we do visit have been used as drug dens are shocking. You can imagine that they're terrible. And I just wish there was a better joined up concept and process with the landlord responsibility and reporting what we see to try and prevent the drug abuse. And we also have profiles normally of the families that are in there. Where are the children? Because we just mentioned the terrible thing, children going missing, persons going missing. I just wish that we could somehow have more information so we could work together from the landlord's point of view and from the housing association point of view. Does that make sense?
No, it entirely. And I think I spoke briefly before around the campaign to sort of target those trusted professionals and how we generate that information and intelligence, because, you know, the police are only going into these locations every now and again. You know, housing officers and landlords are going in frequently, aren't they? And it's about spotting those signs and how we join up that intelligence. So just in a very short-term quick fix around that is that we do have the community intelligence portal, so that's available to all CSPs. And what we would really implore is that they sort of chain. But as I come back to one of my initial points, is if we're not generating intelligence from other professional agencies, then we'll struggle to tackle this. But
I guess just a supplementary there, Deborah, if you don't mind. Gavin, you're dead right. My concern is we're lucky in Melton purely because I sit on both. I'm not sure whether we'd get the information whether that's a mistake or a fluke, but I do feel some associate their housing and the housing bodies actually quite separate from the communities. Does that make sense?
Right.
Because
okay.
they're more concerned of repairs and maintenance. You know the issue. You know, delayed rent and all this sort of stuff. And somehow I'm concerned if the information could get missed between the community, the JAGs and the CSPs. I just wish we could be a bit more formal and say, look, this needs to be a lot better joined up.
No, and again, I think these are the conversations that are going to become more apparent once that serious violence duty lands, and that ability actually that workforce development across local authorities to make things are joined up, and there's a portal for how that information is being developed. And again, it's something that will need to be definitely considered by all areas.
Just to say, we love the work you're doing because it's such an important, so crucial. We just want to support you as much as we can because it's so important.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate that.
Last word from Willie on this one. You're still muted, Willie.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to say very quickly a couple of things. Firstly, as Police and Crime Commissioner, really impressed by the way in which the Leicestershire force has dealt with or is dealing with county lines. I mean, I think it's a pretty good example for other places as well. But it is still very much, as we've been told, an existing problem. Secondly, just around the major operation that took place about drugs early last year, I have to say, from my experience, actually went on one of these raids, the effect on people who live in the area, in the neighbourhood, when they see the police behaving like that towards people that they know or suspect have been making their lives hell for the last few months or even years, is huge. They're really impressed. These aren't the sort of people who reply to surveys, but these are people who feel this extremely strongly. And that in itself, for me, was a justification for what otherwise didn't need to be justified. The only thing that is a problem, and I'll put this just to Gavin, who was a great neighbourhood police boss a few years ago, worked with him closely in Harborough, is this. The problem with getting rid of some of those who are running these schemes, these are very professional people in their own way, is that once there's a vacancy, because the guy's in custody or in prison, someone else will take their place. And that's a constant problem, I suspect, for the police and for all of us, and for CSPs as well, of course, too. Those are the points I wanted to make. I don't know what Gavin wants to say about it.
Thanks, boss. Yeah, no, I agree. When you look at Op Lionheart, it was a massive success because of the volume and the number of arrests made. But when we're already sort of 2 years down the line from that, and a number of those individuals that were arrested as part of that operation now will be coming to the end of their custodial sentence. And so, again, the initial impact is fantastic. But again, there's a wider issue there is, again, that those gaps in this market keep rising up. So it's about how do we tackle, when you sort of look at problem solving, the individuals are only one part of it. It's actually what are we doing to address the locality, the problem that is the place, what are the other external factors. So it's more complex than making arrests and sending people to prison. It's only a short-term fix. And as Mr. Black raises, it's to have the operational side of it is only short term. We've got to have a longer term picture, and I think that's when you're looking at your priorities for the next 12 months, it's actually how are we going to address this, because it is all about prevention and engagement and education, especially with our young people.
Okay.
Thank you,
Chris. Very quickly, then we need to move on. Don't take your hand down now.
Yeah, it is a very quick point. I mean, Gavin, I really take really good presentation, and I really take your point. It may be you've alluded to some of the maybe the way forward as well around the 4P strategy. I'm thinking maybe some coordination of partners. Some obvious things about this would be having a protector element around it. If you go into an area, then obviously your next group of vulnerable people are probably going to be linked to the local schools and stuff. So obviously, but you could do an off-the-shelf type 4P approach to all of this, and maybe it's something we need to discuss outside the meeting, kind of getting the right people around the table to develop some sort of plan around 4Ps, because that kind of works, isn't it? It's tried and trusted.
Yeah, I think that then was I raised that point sort of straight after Operation Lionheart, that there was all of a sudden, wasn't it? And as those people start to come back out of prison, what then, isn't it? And that was always my question about what then. and now we're kind of like, are we starting all over again? So we need to keep that, you know, when these people are released, that they don't go back into it straight away, back into those groups. So yeah, no, definitely agree with that, Chris. Okay, thanks, Gavin. Thanks for coming.
You're
really
very
good
welcome.
Presentation. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Okay, move on to item 10 now. Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, the SPP board update. Paul's taken us through this. If we can take the report as read, Paul, we've obviously all had it. And just pick up some key highlights for us if there's anything you want to just bring our attention to.
I'll pick up two, Deborah. I can see the agenda's going to struggle here, isn't it? I'll pick up two. So safer, well, Victoria's written a book, so it's all there, isn't it? The Safer Streets one isn't quite full. This is changing. So there's, you know, as well as the what's put in the narrative there. On Wednesday, I think it was, or earlier this week anyway. There's an extra 25 million put into the Safer Streets Fund to address the issue with women and girls' safety. So that's something we're working on, as well as the bids. The bids, I think, are all sorted and will go in next week. And thanks to everyone who's participated in that. But there is an additional bit that's about the safety of women and girls. So we'll be working on that, and that's extra money. The other thing is the only other thing I'd highlight is that the work, one of the things on the SPB agenda that links in with what Gavin has said, and I couldn't agree more with what Gavin was said, was, you know, we've got to look at the prevention side of things and the longer term changes. And I mean, for my money, the thing that really focuses on that is, well, all the work of the VRN, obviously, all the work of the VRN, but you know, the trauma strategy is the thing that we're really focusing a lot of attention on. I know people like Gav and others are very involved in that. I'm very happy to come back here and talk a bit more about where that's going, how that's developing. But I'll leave it there. That'll do.
Thanks, Paul. You've answered one of my questions about whether we're going to look at some other areas for Safer Street funding if we're going to put in some more bids. So that'd be good to get an update if we're going to do any more within the area.
Well, I can update you afterwards, Deborah. I'm not entirely sure. Initially, I thought it was just going to be an add-on to the existing process, but I think, Willie, it's now going to be an additional process. We've got to reply by today, so hopefully early next week we'll find out.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think the position's really, sorry, Deborah, to cut in, but I don't think the position's absolutely clear from government yet quite what they want, this extra 25 million, which is new money, by the way.
Yeah.
What they want to spend it on. And everything's been around acquisitive crime up till now, as you know. This is almost certainly, as Paul says, going to have a bias towards the issue of VOG, you know, violence against women and girls. But how much so, I think we've still got to find out. Okay. So they're asking us questions, but I think we should be asking government questions too.
Okay. But obviously, I'm sure I can rely on you all. If there's money available for us, then you're going to bid for it. So I look forward to some future bidding coming forward if we can. And just one other point for me on page 36, paragraph 23, Paul, just about the volunteering and the Lancashire model. Can you just give me a really quick overview of what the Lancashire model is and what sort of volunteers you're looking for within that statement there?
Yeah, sorry. So the Lancashire model was the initial proposal that came really through SPB from Simon Cole. That's a kind of fully integrated single volunteer public service model they've got in Lancashire. The lead in the county pulled together a group to do some work on analysing whether there's an appetite to do that and the benefits of doing that. And they said, well, look, you know, we haven't got the appetite to do the full model, but what we think we can do is things like get a better kind of joint training, joint infrastructure, a passport across volunteering and so on. So just to make volunteering more effective across the different agencies. That's where we're at the moment. And that project will it's kind of done the initial groundwork and it'll kick off early summer, I think. Okay. May time. Yeah.
I'll be interested in how that looks, because I think a lot of people have volunteered, haven't they, over the last year, and that's something that they might want to carry on doing. So we need to harness that as soon as we can to
that was part of the logic, Deborah.
Yeah,
that was part of the logic. Build on what's there.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. I've got no one else indicating for any other questions. Really good report, actually. So Alan's just put his hand up very quickly.
Sorry, Deborah. Just this is for you and for Willie. I had an interesting. I had a briefing for the Environment and Transport a couple of days ago, and we have the figures on safety in regard to accidents and etc. Pathways, anybody falling, not getting knocked over. The point was brought in female safety, which is obviously a major topic at the moment, and it was brought up in regard to when we plan, when we build. Can we start taking that into consideration? And it actually makes a bit of sense, you know, about lighting, roadways, walkways, pathways. You don't want them to go through dangerous areas, or you want them to go through areas which is safer or whatever. It was a difficult one because it is a topic, and I just felt that this would be more of the CSP or this committee, this group. But it is an interesting point when we talk about with planning and developments, which is a lot going on in Leicestershire, and we're talking about cycleways, pathways. What can we do? Can we have any influence in the future to make them safer and acknowledge that there's places where we don't want to put them? And this was put to me, so I just thought I'd share that with you, whether this group can take it further. Thank you, Deborah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Alan. You know, underpasses and unlit paths are not ideal for anyone to walk along, are they? So that's something we can feed back to our housing. I think all of us can feed back to our own districts on that, about how we go about when we are have new developments, that we make sure that they're safe for everyone. Okay, thanks for that. Thanks, Paul. Move on to item 11, community safety survey. Is Stevie Jade, is she taking us through this? Yeah, okay. Obviously, we'll just take the report as read. We've got all the stats there. So if there's anything you just want to pull out, Stevie Jade.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'll just put it. Oh, I can't put it on the screen for some reason. It's not letting me play ball. So Ewan, if you wanted to put it on, please feel free. But yeah, there's lots of the key findings there. Just to say, I am the evidence and evaluation lead from the Violence Reduction Network. So I was asked to provide support in the design. Residents of respondents were satisfied with their local area as a place to live, and that's in line with the national average. 2/3 of respondents felt that their local area was a place where people from different backgrounds get on well together. In fact, only 10% disagreed with this statement. 84%, so the vast majority, felt that they could ask their neighbour for help. When looking at the open text responses, and believe me, there were many, many open text responses for us to analyse. And hopefully you will have had the chance to read the report that was circulated, which provided additional narrative around the thematic analysis. What came out was many of the positives around community cohesion. So lots of residents referred to this good community spirit, a feeling like they knew people within their local area and regularly observing people getting on well together. But it also offered insight into some of those challenges. And it's also worth saying, actually, that there was a strong perception that community cohesion had actually improved during the pandemic as well. So it's something worth thinking about how we can take that forward. But a lot of people said they felt much more connected to people within their local area. But in terms of some of the challenges, one of the key issues related to housing. And again, it's interesting that we've spoken about that today. So the perception was that housing with multiple occupancy or big housing developments, as well as mentions of social housing, sometimes creates challenges around community cohesion. There was also a view, but to a much lesser extent, that racism was also an issue that had an impact on community cohesion. And that was from a small minority of residents who said that they themselves had experienced prejudice, and also a small minority of respondents who mentioned their concerns about the diversity within their local area. Moving on to safety, as would be expected, a lot of people feel safe at home during the day and at night. This dropped to 45% when people were asked about how safe they would feel outside within their local area at night. And again, some of the key themes we've actually mentioned today. So I cannot reiterate the volume of comments that related to street lighting. So a huge volume of people saying that since lights went off, or because there's not a well-lit area, that's why I don't feel safe. The proximity of ASB and crime, also really interesting, because there were many who felt that actually the communication mechanisms such as WhatsApp groups and Facebook pages for local areas were really great at fostering a sense of community, but actually it caused concern as well because they heard about, learnt about instances of ASB and crime that otherwise they would have been unaware of, and that affected their perception of safety. Just to mention around the behaviour of certain groups, a large volume of responses related to young people and in particular students. So just on to the next slide, please. Just to pull out some key bits around ASB and crime, you know, it's positive. More people felt that levels of ASB and crime hadn't changed within the last year compared to those who thought that it had increased. In terms of the most frequently experienced or witnessed forms of ASB, we can see fly tipping. That was 70% who have witnessed this in the last year. It's worth mentioning within that ASB section that although not one of the top, so around 60% of respondents said that they had witnessed or experienced drug dealing and drug use within their local area in the last 12 months, a quarter of those are witnessing this regularly, so either daily or weekly drug use and drug dealing. And again, that's in line with the national average. So the crime survey for England and Wales found also that a quarter of respondents from across England and Wales said that drug use and drug dealing was a fairly big problem within their area. In terms of the most frequently experienced or witnessed forms of crimes, vehicle crime topped at 37%, and looking at the open text responses, so many comments related to road safety, issues around speeding, loud exhaust, loud scooters was a very big issue that was raised, and people hitting cars and then driving off. Around a quarter of the total sample said that they had witnessed or experienced violent crime, online crime, or financial crime. And just the final slide, just something to pick out, and that you'll see that the views around the effectiveness or the satisfaction levels with local responses to ASB fairly mixed between the different agencies. What I would say is looking at the qualitative data that came with it, it's arguably more insightful. So there was a huge range of participants who said that they acknowledged the constraints on resources for both the police and the council, and the detrimental effect that this has had on their ability to respond to the more everyday forms of ASB. You know, respondents spoke about the police and the council being overwhelmed, overstretched, overworked. But in terms of the specific issues picked up, it'll probably come as no surprise to anybody, but the most common issue was around the visibility of police officers in local areas. So this was a real keen area that people mentioned. Also, people spoke about their perception that the police and crime were ineffective at responding to some of the more everyday forms of ASB. And finally, it's just worth mentioning that a common theme to emerge alongside those two was residents not being aware of actually what the local council or the fire and rescue service did around crime and antisocial behaviour. So I'm aware that that's a whistle-stop tour, so please feel free to ask me some questions.
Thanks, Stevie. I've read all the reports that came through from my area, so really interesting to read some of the comments. But I suppose for me, the thing that stood out is the public perception of what you've just said, the police and the council and what they do and what they're able to do. And I suppose that's something we probably need to work on, because we all know the police are visible out there, the council do respond, but it's just that public perception. So it's probably something we need to work on a little bit of how we up that public perception. So that's probably something for me to take away and think about. Ted.
Thank you very much. The following comments are made in my role as the member of this panel representing the Leicestershire Fire and Rescue Fire Authority. Now, there's 2 points. The first one is that having spoken to the senior management of the Fire Authority, the LFRS were not advised by the PCC's office that questions would be asked about the fire service, and they weren't made aware or consulted. The second point is that there's a statistic here that talks about 59%. Now, if I can quote, having spoken to the senior management at Leicestershire Fire and Rescue Service, there is, after everybody that's engaged with the fire brigade, they're asked a question, And if I may read it to you, because this is extremely important and it must be taken into consideration, and therefore I'd like it minuted, please. After the incident questionnaire, overall experience, taking everything into account, how satisfied or dissatisfied are you with the service you receive from the Fire and Rescue Service from first raising the call, if applicable, to any follow-up contact you had with us? And this is from the 4th of April 2019 to yesterday. There are 422 people surveyed. 99% were very satisfied and the remaining 1% were satisfied. So I would take strong contest with the figures provided in this survey.
In terms of the question is around the satisfaction with the Fire and Rescue Services responses to ASB and crime. In terms of who was involved in the design and development of the survey, then that's a question for Victoria Charlton or the OPCC, because they led in terms of the consultation around that survey. So as I say, mine was more around designing the questions and then the analysis of the survey. And can I just also, something you mentioned earlier, Chair, around keeping people informed. So the LGA does the annual polling around satisfaction with local councils, and they found that those residents who are kept more informed, feel that the council keeps them more informed, are much more likely to say that they're satisfied with the local response. So yeah, really good point.
Okay, thank you. Willie? You're muted still.
God, you'd have thought I'd have known by now, Deborah. Very useful survey, I think. I just think it's important, particularly after Ted's point, that it's important to point out, as Stevie J did at the start, that while it's a good number responding to the survey, if you look to look where people lived who responded to the survey, there's very big geographical differences. For example, Rutland was much higher per percentage than Leicester City was. That may not be a surprise, but that's the truth of the matter. And if you look at the age group that responded, much more my age group, I'm afraid, than that of younger people. So I think you have to bear those things in mind. So this isn't necessarily representative of how people feel across the board, but is very helpful as to how certain people feel about these important topics. That's the only point I would make. I'd like to thank Stevie Jade for the work she's done on this.
That's been really interesting. Alan?
Yeah, thanks. I just need to challenge it, and it goes along what Willie said. Sadly, when we do surveys, and exactly what the response you would get, and I would expect, because I studied and worked with a guy called David Snowden. We use a narrative approach. Yeah. It is different. It is more effective. I've introduced it to Melton, and we're getting some great figures back. It takes a little bit longer, but surveys, you've got a hypothesis. We put the words down. People tick a box, and I'm telling you, it don't work anymore. Exactly why we're dealing with young people with telephones, with modern technology. They don't buy into surveys. The surveys we statutorily use now are out of date. They need to be changed to get the real figures. Narrative approach, which is very important, and it's a framework. It uses cognitive approach. But you can use simple words. We listen to the stories. We do this in Australia with their Aboriginal culture now. We listen to their stories. We get their experiences so we can build, support, and understand their experiences. We're not doing, we said, tell us your experience. We didn't give them a list. We didn't put a checklist. We didn't have a tick box. We said, talk to us. Let's have a cup of tea. What's your experience living in Fairmead? Tell me your thoughts. Tell me, just talk to me. Yeah. And your tendency, if you start learning to listen, incredible information comes through their life. And then this guy, you have a map, and you then put all these dots down. It's like a spider web. And then you start beginning to really focus on the real issues on communities have. It's so valuable. Whether you know or not, I studied psychology, I graduated in it, I've worked with Aboriginal psychology in Australia. I do understand this, but this is an approach I think is very valuable. Surveys don't work. We've got to be serious. They're not as powerful as we think they are.
Could I just add into that, just to echo actually what you're saying, Alan, as somebody for 10 years who's worked with engaging with diverse communities, particularly around topics of hate crime. It is always about having a mixed methods approach. Surveys is just one tool. If you really want to get the richness of data, understand lived reality, the context in which people are living in, then you have to have qualitative approaches of interviews, focus groups. So I agree. The more that CSPs can do that, the better.
Sure, I knew you would do, and I think what Willie did say.
Okay, Alan, and I'm going to move on because of time. All right. Oh, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to reflect Councillor Parton's comments there. The survey responses we get for the fire and rescue services in our interactions with the community from our core strategy duty are 99%, well, 100% positive. It's very satisfied or satisfied. I am intrigued to understand a little bit more about this data because we, as a member of the CSP, we have a duty to support ASB and crime reduction. So I'll be really interested to understand more detail around it, the time period it was done over. Whilst it doesn't make fantastic reading compared to our stats we get from our statutory area of business, I still think though there are some positives in there that 59% are satisfied with the fire and rescue service. Whereas the organisation, and this isn't me pitting one organisation against the other, who are solely responsible for crime and disorder, we've got a slightly higher response from the public on that. So I take some good news from this, but I really am a little bit sceptical about the questions, the period of the question was asked over, and actually the actual the survey group, number of people who responded. So I'd look forward to seeing that information, please.
Yeah, I'm sure Steve J can forward that on to you, the information that's available, if you want to look at further detail. Yeah.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks for coming, Steve. Thanks for all your work on that.
Thank you.
Okay, going to move on to item 12 now, the performance 2020 to 21. Rick, obviously, we take the report as read, and obviously people are able to click on the link, aren't they, to go and see their localised data as much as they want to. So just any highlights you want to pick out of your report?
As you said, the information is available to everybody via the local link. Started the report due to some time frames, the data, particularly around youth offending and re-offending, is the same as Q2. That's due to the vagaries of the timeframes that data is actually collated. The other that I would highlight is that it's perhaps an obvious statement, but readers need to bear in mind that some of the key performance indicators are not standalone. And the example I've used in the report is around violence with injury. A subset of that is domestic violence with injury. And in fact, something like a third of the violence with injury rates made up of domestic violence with injury. So there will be a crossover in some of the data. Moving on to paragraph 7 within the report is basically the summary of the report. And most of the crime indicators that you'll see are stable or on a downward trend. The one that stands out, obviously, is the violence with injury rate, which has been increasing over the last 6 quarters. And the other half of paragraph 7 talks about ASB. The report does outline some of the caveats around the complexity of ASB data and the fact that the references made within the report are county-wide trends. There will be some local variation. A couple of districts that would have seen increases in ASB. I say it's complex. The data is collated. I'd say the highlights are that the police data that was collated had been on an increase, and that has now levelled off. The case managed ASB has been on a downward trend, but a couple of districts have actually seen increases. And the survey data, which relies on questions within the community-based survey, seen a slight increase in negative. Now that is, I'm mindful of the time, and that is a summary of the report. I can go into the detail under each section if you want me to.
You're cutting out quite a bit, Rick. So I think we'll leave it there. I don't know if anyone's got any questions. Alan, is that an old hand that's up, Alan? Okay. Anyone got any questions for Rick? Really good report, Rick. So you know that I hadn't anything further to pick out of that.
Okay.
Okay, thanks a lot, Rick. We'll move on. No one's indicating that any questions for you. Item 13, Glen Parva prison update. I don't know if Nick's joined us or is just Raj here. Oh, they're both here now. Okay, obviously we've got the newsletter here that's been attached to the meeting. So anything you just want to pick out for us?
Well, I was just going to say that I don't know, given the time, whether you just wanted to have a Q&A in terms of anything in particular that maybe that the team want to know about.
I just picked up your key performance targets on there, how well you're doing against what you plan to do. So I think you're hitting over your targets really well. So it's good to see that local businesses and local people are benefiting from the build. I haven't got any further questions at all, unless there's anything you wanted to pick out particularly. Has anyone else got any questions that they wanted to ask?
So yeah, so I think just a couple of the key things then for me would be about COVID and on site, what's going on. So we have actually introduced lateral flow testing on site. Of course, it's voluntary, but of course the take up is good, and that's to try and manage the situation as much as we can. Other than that, there are no, at the moment, she says, touching wood, no reports of any isolations, etc. on site in terms of the contractors. But what we are seeing on some of our other projects is obviously where the suppliers are actually contracting COVID, and then there's isolations, it can affect the outputs. But so far for Glen Parva, not bad. We're in week 29 of a 127-week programme. The precast concrete panels have started to be erected this week, so it's a huge milestone for the project. We get very excited about concrete, so that's going on. So it all kind of feels like it's moving, and it's interesting you say that because when you look at the newsletter in February, it's moved on so fast already. So lots to say, and happy to bring an update and maybe some videos at the next meeting if you'd like. But just handing over to Nick, because he's got some important updates. Nick.
Yeah, just quickly, conscious of everyone's time. I think just to mention the main thing is that we have launched the competition to who will operate the prison. The government has made the decision that it will be privately operated. 4 companies are bidding to run the prison. There are 6 companies on the framework. 4 of those companies have stated their intention to bid. They are G4S, that have recently won HMP 5 Wells in Wellingborough. Also Serco and Sodexo that are already providers on the market to HMPPS, and new to the adult custodial market is MTC that currently operate Rainsbrook Secure Detention Centre in Rugby. So we have started the competition. The contract is due to be awarded at the end of this year. And then we will start mobilising that contract into the new year. So there may be a possibility you will hear one of those 4 companies getting in touch with local organisations, local businesses as they build their bid. I'm aware that they've done that already, some of those companies. But yeah, so activity is now ramping up on that. Interim bids due in 2 months, full and final bids due at the end of July, when we then start evaluating the bids.
Okay, thank you. Les, you got a question?
Yeah, just one. Members may recall that right at the very outset, I picked up the small business opportunity with my Federation of Small Business head on. So yeah, it's just a courteous question, really. The 2 dashboards of where we are and what you've achieved, so your KPIs basically. Are you happy for or willing to allow us to share that across our kind of social media routes?
Absolutely. This is a public document.
Yeah, but that doesn't always mean that you're happy for things to be snaffled. You know, you own the copyright to it. You know, need to check.
We are very proud of what we've achieved, aren't we, Nick? And absolutely, and I think the only thing I would say, it's the story that goes with that, the supporting narrative, because of course people can look at that and say, well, that bit's not very good. But what they've got to understand is, as I say, we're in week 29 of a 125-week programme. So for us, it's very early days, and to see that level of achievement already is obviously outstanding. So absolutely happy with that.
No, I say it's within my district authority, and clearly community services CSP as such like comes under mine and Becca's wing, who's the senior officer. I just think we should big it up. I think you should be proud, and I think we should big it up and let our residents and businesses know, how successful that programme is.
Excellent, thank you, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for hanging around to the end.
No problem.
No problem.
Thank you. And another update and some videos would be really good. And hopefully some of us might be able to get on site at some point in the future and actually see it coming together. Be good to get out there and see it. Okay, on to item 14. Any other business? I've got nothing else to bring to you. And then we've got the date of the next meeting is on Friday, the 18th of June at 10 a.m. Thank you all for hanging around. We're only 10 minutes over, so not too bad actually. It was quite a full agenda, but some really good discussions ongoing. So thank you all for bearing with us, and good to see you all.
Well done, Chair. Well managed.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.